Hello everyone, I'm Swati Singh Parmar, Assistant Professor at Dharmashastra National Law University, Jabalpur, Madhya Pradesh. In our today's lecture, we will discuss about international organizations. And within this discussion, we will focus on these areas. First, we'll talk about kinds of international organizations. Then we will briefly look at the functions of the international organization. We'll also see how the international organizations are categorized in terms of the functions they perform. Then we will transcend to the categorization of international organizations from the point of view of geography. Then from the point of view of the participation, so whether the government is a participant or a non-government organization is participant, so categorization of international organizations on that tangent. And then eventually we will look at categorization of international organizations on the basis of the role. But before we start our discussion today, let us first understand the need of international organizations. So, as societies developed and nations, the boundaries, the political units that we know as nations were formed, most of the issues around the people within a territorial boundary were decided by the national laws to which they belong to. So, for the citizens, their private and public affairs were dealt by the national laws of the nation to which the citizens belong to. But then the national laws may be capable in most of the situations, but not in all the situations, because no state can function in isolation. So there was a need felt with the advancement of modern international law, there was a need felt that there are certain issues in law which are to be dealt with law, but then they cannot be solely left to a national legislation. And therefore, there is a need of nations coming together and legislating on certain issues, or if not legislating, then dealing with certain issues. Because international organizations are not only legal, they may be political or otherwise. So, international organizations were established with the need that nations on their own cannot deal with all the issues, and there are certain issues, for example, climate change, for example, transboundary pollution, transboundary environmental harm, terrorism, statelessness, etc. So these are certain issues which are to be dealt with the states collectively. And this collectivity of state has to culminate into some organization. So that was the point where international organizations, the need of establishing it was felt. And with this background, international organizations, different in character, some private, public, different in composition, different in their openness or closeness, were created. Now, different organizations were created in different times in history. So we'll look at a few of the organizations in the course of our today's lecture as examples of our discussion. So let us now look at the different kinds of international organizations. And I must mention in the onset that these kinds of international organizations are not exhaustive. So I'm discussing the more popular and widely known categorization of international organization, but there may be other categorizations as well. So there can be several bases to classify international organizations. First basis could be, as I mentioned, participation. So who the participant is in an international organization, in establishing or creating an international organization, decides the character of international organization in terms of a governmental international organization or a non-governmental international organization. So if there are governments of several states, governments of state A, B, C, D, who come together, negotiate, and create an international organization that would be a governmental international organization where the participants are the governments of the states. While on the other hand, there may be situations where not the state's authority of government, but without the state's authority that one sees through government, formal government participation is not there in creation of international organization, but there are non-governmental organizations, certain groups which are not the wings of government, or they're not the subset of government, but they're private entities who come together and create an international organization. So those would be called as non-governmental international organizations, or NGIO. It is similar to the NGO that we know in the national paradigm, the non-governmental organizations. It is more or less similar to NGOs. Now, second categorization can be on membership of the international organization. So there can be international organizations which are open. By open international organizations, I mean that the membership of international organizations can be open, where an international organization is created with the participation of several states, and then for other states who did not participate in the negotiation and creation of that international organization, still for other states it is open for them to become a member of such international organization. So these are open international organizations. While there can be international organizations which have closed membership. So suppose three states come together and they create an international organization for conducting business on commodity X between only those three states. So that international organization may not be open to others. So it may be more states also who come together and create an organization, but then that organization is not open for membership for other states to join. Then there is yet another categorization which is done on the basis of the function or the purpose that international organizations perform. And the two main categories in it are multi-purpose or generic international organizations. So international organizations which are created and they have a wide array of functions that they perform, or they are for economic, political, legal, and other issues, or generic issues. While at the other hand, there may be an international organization which is specialized. So it is created with a specific purpose, a specific aim in mind, and it deals with only certain category of things and does not deal with different diverse issues. So that may be called as a single purpose or specific purpose international organization. Then there is yet another classification of international organization, which is on the basis of geography. So international organizations can be international, as the name is. So that would be a universal or global organization which has participation of most of the states from different geographies of the world. But then there can be regional organizations also. So there can be Asian organization, there can be African organization, American organizations, Australian organizations, European organizations, etc. And then there can be sub-regional organizations also. So Latin American, Southeast Asian, West East Asian, Middle East Asian organizations. So these are three broad categorizations of international organization on the basis of geography. Now, the fifth categorization is on the basis of the role or the performance of international organizations, or the theme which international organizations are foregrounded in. So international organizations may be legal, where they are engaged only in creating legislations. They are drafting, negotiating, and creating treaties, or they are legislating in other forms. There can be international organizations which are purely political in nature, so states or the governments of the states coming together and creating an international organization for political purposes. Then there can be international organizations which are purely based on economic purposes, so which perform economic functions. Then there can be international organizations which have judicial performances, which are engaged in judicial performances. For example, International Court of Justice, situated at The Hague, Netherlands, or International Criminal Court, again situated at The Hague. So these are different categories of international organizations according to participation, membership, function, geography, the theme, and one last category is the number of participants. So this category is created on the basis of number of participants to an international organization, which may uh, be bilateral or multilateral. So if there are two states that create an international organization or international agency, it may be called bilateral. If there are three, it may be tripartite or trilateral. While if there are several member states who create an international organization, it is known as multilateral creation or multilateral international organization. Bilateral or multilateral treaties, this distinction in terms of treaty is more popular and more uh, exemplified than this categorization in international organizations. Now let us see a few categorizations in little detail and with the help of certain examples. So if we talk about the categorization of international organizations on the basis of function, then, as I discussed, there may be generic international organizations which perform generic or general or non-specialized duties and functions. And examples of it, two prominent examples of it, are the League of Nations, which was established in 1920 by the 1990 Treaty of Versailles, and the United Nations, which was established in 1945. Now, these two organizations, the League of Nations, as most of us know, that is regarded as the predecessor to the United Nations. The League of Nations performed wide array of duties. So it had political functions, it had legal functions, it had economic functions, etc. So, and similarly, the successor of the League of Nations, that is the United Nations. United Nations also performs different categories of functions, starting from the generic political, economic, financial issues, then cultural issues, then its judicial functioning is performed by its judicial wing, which is known as the International Court of Justice. So, so both League and the United Nations were generic public international organizations that performed wide array of duties and role in international society. Now, the other part is the specialized or the specific international organization. These are those international organizations that are focused on a particular thing, a particular tangent. So, for example, World Bank. Now, the World Bank is is focused only on financial and economic issues, money lending, and other financial regulations in terms of international economic law and international financial institutional laws. Then there is another specialized international organization, which is ILO, or International Labour Organization. International Labour Organization deals with labor law related issues. So it is focused on labor laws and regulating, coordinating and cooperating between various labor laws of national jurisdictions is the sole focus of International Labour Organization. So this is another specialized or specific international organization. Third example of a specialized international organization would be International Telecommunication Union, which is focused only on telecommunication related issues. So if we see through these examples, we'll see the stark difference between generic international organization and specific or specialized international organization. Now let us move forward and see the kind of categorization on the basis of geography. So on the basis of geography, there are again two categories. One is global, and the examples of it again would be the League of Nations, which was a global or universal international organization, which most of the states of the world could participate, become a member of it. Similarly, the United Nations again is a global international organization. It has a global presence. It has global participation. So various states of the world from different continents, different remote parts of the world are represented at United Nations. They are participants at United Nations, and that makes United Nations an example of a global international organization. Now, another example would be World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization again has global participation. Then World Bank. Again, World Bank has a global participation. The participating states belong to various continents, and it's not localized in that sense. On the other hand, are local or regional organizations, and examples of it would be EU, the European Union, which is regional to the Europe, the African Union or AU as its abbreviated form. It is focused only for African nations. Then the ASEAN or Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which is focused only on Southeast Asian nations. So these are examples of regional and sub-regional international organizations. Now, moving forward and looking at another category, the governmental and non-governmental international organizations. First, the governmental, and examples of governmental international organizations would be World Trade Organization, where the state governments participate. State governments can be the member states, while private entities or non-governmental agencies cannot be the members of these organizations. So one is World Trade Organization or WTO in its abbreviated form. Second is European Union or EU. Then African Union or AU. Then Organization of American States or OAS. Then International Atomic Energy Agency or IAEA. Then United Nations would also be an example of governmental international organization. And then the World Bank. Now, if we look at the other hand, the non-governmental organizations, the examples would be Amnesty International, which is AI in abbreviation, Transparency International, that looks into the transparency standards in various national jurisdictions. This is TI in short. Then World Wildlife Fund or WWF in short. Then Greenpeace is also a famous non-governmental international organization. And then International Committee of the Red Cross or ICRC, that is known for its functioning in international humanitarian law, that is during the times of war. So these are examples of non-governmental international organizations. These are participated not by governmental agencies purely, but these are the efforts of non-governmental entities, private entities who have created this international organization, unlike those which are mentioned here, for example, WTO, EU, AU, etc. Now, moving forward, if we look at the categories of international organization on the basis of the role they perform, then this kind of categorization is usually given to the international organization by the participants or the member states who participate. So it is the member states' prerogative who decide that, okay, the international organization that we are creating would perform political functions or would perform cultural functions or economic functions or politico-economic functions or politico-legal functions, etc. So whether a specific role is to be performed or two or more specific roles are to be performed or which specific roles are to be performed by the international organization is usually decided by the parties who are creating the international organization. And the role that international organizations will perform, this is mentioned usually in the constitutive document of the international organization. So, in case of national laws, we would know that there is a law of the land, which is the constitution. So, in case of India, Constitution of India is the primary document from which the Indian state and its various wings derive their power, duties, role, authorities from. And it is a primary piece of legislation from which other legislations also derive their authority, force, and power from. So, constitution is the constituting document for India. Similarly, for international organization, they also have their own constitutions. So, for example, if I talk about the League of Nations, then its constitution is officially named the Covenant of the League of Nations. So, the Covenant of the League of Nations was the constituting document that created the League of Nations. And this covenant mentioned the role and functions that the League of Nations will perform. And who mentioned these role and functions of League? This was mentioned by the states who participated in negotiating this covenant of League of Nations. So, it is the participating states or the parties or the member states who decide on which role to give to the international organization that they are creating. Similarly, if we take another example of the United Nations, then the Charter of the United Nations is the constituting document or the constitution of the United Nations. Again, if we take the example of International Criminal Court, ICC, that was created by the Rome Statute. So, Rome Statute is the constitution of the International Criminal Court. And these documents, the Covenant for League, the Charter for United Nations, or Rome Statute for ICC, these are the documents which mention the role of the League, United Nations, and the International Criminal Court, respectively. Now, what are the functions that international organizations perform? So, as we just saw that there can be different wide array of functions that international organizations perform, and if we have to club these different functions into some heads, non-exhaustive heads, then those would be monitoring and protecting human rights. There can be international organizations for financial support, for example, IBRD or the World Bank. There can be policy coordination international organizations. There can be international organizations focused on economic development. There can be international organizations and regional organizations for political cooperation between states and governments. And then there can be international organizations that are engaged in moderating and regulating certain activities. So these are the different kinds of role that usually the international organizations perform. And I would suggest to all our viewers that whatever international organizations we discussed in the course of today's lecture, you must go to the official website of these international organizations and try to look at their home or about us page to know more about them. Also, maybe try to look at the different kinds of role they perform. It would really clear our discussion, and it will exemplify most of the things that we discussed in our today's lecture. With that, I would end today's discussion. Thank you.